Guys, I'm in a fix and need some serious help. I recently found out something that completely shocked me. My own brother has put me in a debt of $50,000. For months, without me knowing, he had been using my name and my personal information to open new credit cards. He then used those cards to pay for his everyday expenses and whatever else he wanted. I had no idea this was happening. I only learned about it when I received a letter from the bank. In the letter, they said I was responsible for paying back all the money that was spent. They also warned me that if I didn't pay, they would keep adding fines and making the debt even bigger. At first, I couldn't believe what I was reading because I didn't even have an account with this bank. I thought it must have been some kind of mistake or maybe even a scam. Out of confusion, I called the bank's helpline to clear things up. That's when they told me that according to their records, I did have an account with them and had been using one of their credit cards for quite some time. Hearing that left me stunned. I just sat there, completely shocked, trying to process how this could even be possible. My first reaction was to ask the bank to close this account right away. But they told me that I couldn't just do it over the phone. I would have to come in person. That made me even more anxious because I knew something serious was happening and I had no idea how bad it really was. When I finally went to the bank, I was really nervous. I didn't know what I was about to find out. A staff member sat down with me and went through the details of the account. That's when I learned the truth. The credit card that was taken out under my name had been used constantly for months. Purchases, transactions, charges. It had been swiped and used everywhere, piling up debt I didn't even know existed. I immediately told the bank staff that none of this was me. I had never opened that account, never requested that card, and certainly hadn't made any of those transactions. They understood and told me that in situations like this, I needed to file a police report so it could be officially investigated. So I went ahead and reported everything to the police. That was when the full weight of the situation finally hit me. After the investigation began, I discovered that the total debt in my name wasn't just from this one bank. It added up to around $50,000. The police found that my identity had been used to open multiple credit cards, not only at this bank but at several different banks. The realization was overwhelming. What I thought was one problem with a single card turned out to be a much bigger mess that had been going on for months right under my nose. After some time, the police were able to trace where all the activity was coming from. To my surprise, everything pointed back to my hometown. That immediately narrowed things down because the only people still living there are my parents. When I heard this, I was stunned. I had been preparing myself for the possibility that some stranger had stolen my identity, maybe through a data leak or some scam, but the thought that it could be someone from my own family had never really crossed my mind. Out of all the people in the world who could have done this to me, I never expected it to be my own parents. I didn't waste any time. I packed my bags and went straight there because I needed answers face to face. It felt strange being back after so long. The streets, the familiar places, even the air felt different now that I was returning with such heavy thoughts on my mind. When I arrived at my parents' house, they seemed surprised to see me show up so suddenly. Still, they welcomed me in warmly, like nothing was wrong, and for a moment I almost felt guilty for suspecting them. But I knew I had to confront them. So I sat down with both my mom and dad and asked them directly about the credit cards and the debt that had been piling up under my name. At first they acted confused, as if they had no idea what I was talking about. They denied everything and tried to brush it off, pretending they weren't involved. But deep down, I could feel something wasn't right. I told them I had legitimate proof, so their denying won't work. I said I would bring the local police here and show them the records, and that if the police questioned them, it wouldn't be easy to hide anything. I told them that in a small hometown, this sort of thing doesn't stay secret. If the police got involved, other people would find out what had been done. Saying that seemed to change the room. The parents looked guilty. I could feel the tension rise. I wanted them to understand how serious this was. Not to scare them for the sake of it, but because I needed the truth and I needed them to take responsibility. I told them in no uncertain terms that what they'd done was illegal and that they could be arrested for fraud. I said it calmly but firmly. There was no room for excuses. I wanted them to understand the seriousness of it. This wasn't just a family problem, it was a crime that could carry real consequences. At that point, my dad's face fell. He looked away for a long moment and then quietly, he finally spoke. He admitted that it wasn't him or my parents who had done it. It was my brother. Hearing that felt like being punched in the stomach. I was stunned, like my whole world had tilted. All the anger, the confusion, and the betrayal I'd been holding inside rushed up at once. For context, I didn't even know my brother had come back home. You see, all my life, as far back as I can remember, my brother has been a crackhead. He first started using when he was still in high school. At the time, everyone around him, teachers, family, even friends, tried to help or at least warn him about what he was doing to himself. Teachers would call home, complain to my parents, and try to get through to him, but nothing ever changed. Eventually, his life at school completely fell apart. His grades dropped so badly and he skipped so many classes that he was finally kicked out. That should have been a wake-up call, but instead it just pushed him further into the same path. He began spending entire days and nights outside, wandering with the same group of friends who were also hooked on drugs. Sometimes he wouldn't come home for days. My parents and I would worry endlessly, not knowing if he was safe or even alive. We would go out searching for him, checking places we thought he might be. More often than not, we'd find him in dangerous areas, run-down spots, hidden corners of the city, places no one should be spending time in. And when we did find him, he was always completely out of his mind, strung out, unable to even talk to us properly. Those moments were terrifying and heartbreaking at the same time. Seeing my own brother like that, lost in himself, barely recognizing us, left scars that never really faded. It felt like we were slowly losing him piece by piece, and no matter what we tried, nothing seemed to bring him back. This was also the time when my brother and his drug-addicted friends eventually started breaking into people's homes, taking anything they could steal and then selling it to get money for more drugs. Those years were some of the hardest of my life because of his actions. People in our neighborhood began looking at us differently. Our family gained a reputation for being thieves, even though we had nothing to do with what my brother was doing. At school and among friends, it was even worse. I was often bullied and mocked because of him. People would call me names or make fun of my family, all because of what my brother had done. My parents really tried their best to help him at first. They looked for drug rehabilitation centers and tried to get him admitted so he could get treatment, but no matter what they did, he would always run away. All their efforts and money were wasted because he never stayed long enough to get better. On top of that, he would also steal money from my parents' drawers to buy drugs. No amount of warnings or scolding seemed to stop him, and the worst part, he would even wait for me outside school just to pressure me into giving him my lunch money. He didn't care whether I ate or not, as long as I gave him my money for him to buy more drugs. Can you imagine that? Your own older brother, the person who's supposed to protect you, turning around and taking advantage of you like that. It was humiliating. I felt powerless, angry, and betrayed, not just by him, but by the situation as a whole. As a result of everything, I just hated my brother. I mean, he was my oldest sibling, someone I should have been able to look up to, someone who was supposed to protect me and care for me. Instead, he was constantly making bad choices that were destroying all our lives. Things finally reached a breaking point when he suddenly disappeared for 3 whole months. He didn't show up in any of his usual spots, and no one knew where he had gone. We searched everywhere we could think of, but it was as if he had vanished completely. My parents were heartbroken, mourning for him, but there was nothing they could do. By that point, it felt like he had slipped entirely out of reach, and we had to accept that there was little we could do to help him or keep him safe. Then, one day, just as I was about to graduate from high school, I came home and was immediately met with chaos. From a distance, I could hear my parents yelling loudly, the sound sharp and angry. There were also noises of utensils being thrown around, clattering against the walls and floor. My mother's voice broke through the commotion as she started crying uncontrollably. Heart racing, I ran toward the kitchen, the source of all the noise, and what I saw made my stomach drop. My brother, the one we hadn't seen in months, was standing there, holding a knife, his face wild and unrecognizable. He was threatening my parents, who were cowering in fear. I couldn't believe my eyes. After months of worry and stress about where he had been, he had returned only to torture us more. He looked like he was completely possessed, like he wasn't even himself anymore. He was screaming at my parents, his voice raw and unhinged, and at the same time he was throwing things at them, plates, utensils, anything he could grab. All the while he was demanding money, insisting that they give it to him so that he could buy more drugs. My mom was on her knees, tears streaming down her face, begging him to stop. Her voice was trembling, full of fear and desperation. My dad, trying to stay calm despite the chaos, was pleading with him too. He kept telling my brother that they wanted to help him, that if he let them, they could admit him to a rehabilitation center so he could get better. But nothing seemed to reach him. His rage and desperation had taken over completely. Suddenly my brother noticed me standing there. In an instant he turned and rushed toward me, the knife clutched tightly in his hand. I screamed, unable to hold back my fear. Every instinct in me was screaming to run, to get away, to protect myself. Before I could react, he pressed the knife against my throat. My heart felt like it had stopped. I could barely breathe, my body frozen with terror. Then, in a voice filled with rage and desperation, he yelled at my parents that if they didn't give him money, he would slit my throat. I can't even begin to describe the fear I felt in that moment. His eyes were wild, completely unrecognizable, like he was no longer the brother I knew. Looking at him, I knew deep down that he wasn't bluffing. He was dangerous, and there was no predicting what he might do next. My parents did their best to stay calm and negotiate with him. They pleaded, begged, tried every word they could think of to reason with him, to convince him to put the knife down. But it didn't work. My brother wouldn't let go of me. He pressed the knife even harder against my throat, and the pain and fear shot through me like lightning. I could feel every heartbeat, every shiver, every tremor of my body as I struggled to stay as still as possible. My mind raced, thinking of what I could do to survive, while my parents tried desperately to calm him down. It was one of the most terrifying moments of my life, feeling completely at the mercy of someone I had once trusted. In the end, my parents had no other choice. They were forced to hand over all the money they had kept for emergencies at home, because refusing him felt impossible. But he wasn't satisfied with just the cash. Without a hint of shame, he rifled through my mom's things and took her jewelry right from her locker, as if he had every right to do it. He grabbed everything he could reach, his hands moving quickly, greedily, while we all stood there frozen. Only when he had taken absolutely everything he could think of did he turn his attention back to me. He shoved me toward my parents, almost like tossing me aside, and then ran off before we could even react. As you can probably imagine, I was completely shaken and traumatized after what happened. I had never, not even for a second, imagined that my own brother could turn on me like that he could actually try to kill me. The shock wasn't the only thing I was dealing with. I also had a cut on my throat from the knife and I was bleeding. The wound wasn't massive, but it was serious enough that I had to be taken to the hospital. Even after everything that happened, my parents refused to file a police report. That's right, after seeing me hurt, after knowing what my brother had done, they still tried to convince me not to involve the authorities. They told me it would look bad on his record and that it could damage his future. I remember feeling completely blindsided. Here I was, injured and shaken, and instead of my parents focusing on what had actually happened to me, they were more worried about protecting him. I remember thinking, what future? What kind of future are we talking about here? This was the same person who had just threatened our lives, who had attacked his own family over cash and jewelry. If he could do something like this to us, what on earth was he capable of out there on his own? The thought made my stomach turn. But my parents kept urging me to stay quiet. They told me to keep my mouth shut and promised that they would do everything to make sure something like this never happened again. Even though I had just been through a terrifying, traumatic experience, the burden of letting it go fell entirely on me. My brother faced no consequences for what he had done, and somehow I was expected to accept that. It felt so unfair. I don't really know what happened to my brother after that day. Maybe he felt ashamed of what he had done, or maybe he just didn't want to face any of us. Whatever the reason, he never showed his face again. That was the last time I ever saw him, and honestly, I was completely fine with it. Unlike my parents, I didn't care whether he was still alive or not. After that, I focused on my own life. I went away to a good college, threw myself into my studies and my future, and never looked back. The past was behind me and had no intention of letting it touch me again until this moment. Now my parents were telling me that my brother wasn't just back. He was responsible for racking up all the credit card debt in my name. They explained that he couldn't get a credit card himself because of his history, so with their permission he had resorted to using my identity to open accounts and run up debt. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything that had happened, my brother was once again back in my life in a harmful way. My mom tried to justify it by saying they would have told me eventually, but they were nervous about how I might react. Her voice was calm, like she was trying to soften the blow before it landed. My dad joined in to tell me that $50,000 debt wasn't really a big deal, since I had a good job and could definitely afford it. Then, without a hint of shame, he said now that I knew the truth, instead of reporting my brother and getting him arrested, I should just pay off the debt for the sake of family. It felt surreal. After everything that has happened, they seemed more concerned about protecting my brother than standing up for me. The idea that I was expected to take responsibility for his actions simply because he was family was infuriating and exhausting all at once. I completely lost it. I argued with them, telling them that if $50,000 really wasn't a big deal, then why couldn't they give me the money to help pay it off? I wanted them to see the hypocrisy, to understand how unfair it was that I was being asked to shoulder the burden alone. My parents flustered, unsure of how to respond. I went on to tell them in no uncertain terms that there was no way I was going to pay off the debt my brother had racked up. This wasn't just a financial problem. It was his responsibility, and I wasn't going to be dragged into cleaning up after him again. I made it clear that if they didn't take steps to fix this themselves, I would have no choice but to involve the authorities and get him arrested. I reminded them sharply that protecting him at the expense of my life, my finances, and my peace of mind was completely unacceptable. For once, I wasn't going to stay silent. The fear, the trauma, and the injustice of everything he had done didn't give me room to negotiate. Either they took action or I would. But my parents refused to back down. They kept begging and pleading with me, insisting that I was being selfish. They acted as if I was the one at fault for standing up for myself, as if my refusal to pay off my brother's debt was some kind of betrayal. It was maddening. After everything I had endured, they were still trying to make me feel guilty for insisting on justice. Their words felt heavy, but I wasn't going to be manipulated into covering for him. So Reddit, AITA for not letting this go. Update 1. A lot of people have been asking if I've actually met my brother since this latest mess and confronted him. Yes, I did. I am currently staying at my parents' place, and so is he. Just like my parents, my brother was completely shameless when I confronted him about his fraudulent actions. He tried to justify what he did, saying that he is trying to do his best to turn things around, but that it's hard in this economy. He explained that he had decided to get sober and move back home. Our parents had welcomed him with open arms. After coming back here, he did find a job, but the pay was too less, which meant he could hardly pay his bills on time. According to him, opening bank accounts in my name was his only chance to start afresh and keep up with his lifestyle. Hearing that felt surreal, like nothing had changed. First of all, he was already earning money on his own, but instead of being satisfied with that, he was greedy enough to try to take even more by dragging me into debt. The same person who once threatened my life now had the audacity to treat my identity and my money as tools for his own convenience. It's one thing to fail. It's another to keep hurting the people who have already suffered because of you. I yelled at him, letting out all the anger and frustration I'd been holding in, and I told him flat out that he needed to pay me back immediately. I reminded him of everything he'd done to me before, and made it clear that using my identity for his own benefit was completely unacceptable. There was no excuse, no hard times that justified it. I demanded accountability, and for the first time I think he realized I wasn't going to let him slide like my parents had. Then he started trying to negotiate. He said he could close the bank accounts and cancel the credit cards in my name, but there were 2 conditions. First, I had to promise not to report him to the police and pay off the $50,000 debt he had racked up. Second, I had to send him money every month to help cover his expenses. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything, he was trying to turn the situation around so that I was still the one footing the bill and giving him money on top of it. I scoffed and told him that I had a better solution to my problems: going to the authorities and reporting him. I made it crystal clear that I wasn't going to negotiate or be manipulated. I told him I would sue him for everything he owned and make him pay one way or another. No excuses, no favors. He was going to be held accountable, plain and simple. My brother started getting pissed and even tried to threaten me, but I didn't flinch. I reminded him that I'm not the same 16-year-old girl he attacked all those years ago. This time, if he laid a hand on me, I promised he would regret it. He would face hell. For the first time, he looked genuinely taken aback, like he hadn't expected me to fight back with words, let alone the resolve to take action against him. It was a small moment, but I felt a rush of clarity and strength. Finally, the tables had turned. Tomorrow, I'm going to report my brother to the authorities. I'll post an update once everything unfolds and let you all know what happens. Update 2. It's been 2 days and wow, I didn't expect so many people to keep responding to my post. I've been getting a ton of questions about what happened and what I'm planning to do next, so I thought I'd answer the most common ones here. Question: why didn't you call the police back when your brother first attacked you? I wanted to, but my parents begged me not to. They said it would ruin his future and look bad on his record. At the time, I felt trapped. I was injured, scared, and being pressured by the people I trusted the most. Question: why didn't your parents protect you after the attack? Answer: that's exactly what shocked me the most. Instead of focusing on my safety, they were worried about my brother. They promised me it wouldn't happen again, but they clearly prioritized protecting him over holding him accountable. Question: do you think your brother has changed over the years? Answer: no, absolutely not. Of course he hasn't changed. He's not just violent and manipulative, but he has now caused me serious financial harm that could potentially affect my credit score forever. Question: did you go to the police and report your brother? Yes, I went to the police and reported my brother. He's been arrested. My parents completely lost it when they found out. They yelled, begged, even tried to convince me to drop it. But there's nothing they can do. For once, I didn't let their fear of family reputation or their attempts to protect him get in the way. This is the same brother who once threatened my life, who stole from me, and who manipulated me, and now he's finally facing consequences. It's about accountability, and I'm not stepping back this time. Question: are you worried about your brother retaliating? Answer: of course I am, at least a little, but I've talked to a lawyer and my brother has no footing to stand on. All the evidence is on my side: bank statements, credit card records, everything showing that he committed fraud using my identity. The authorities are involved now and I'm making sure everything is documented properly. I feel more secure knowing that this time I'm not alone and that there are legal safeguards in place. He can threaten and try to manipulate all he wants, but it won't work this time. Question: would you ever forgive your brother? Answer: forgiveness isn't on the table right now. What he did isn't something I can just brush off. Maybe someday I'll find a way to let go of the anger, but for now, I need accountability and justice. That's what matters most. Update 3. It's been 5 months since my last update, and so much has happened in that time. I took my brother to court and I won. It wasn't easy. There were long days of paperwork, lawyer meetings, and reliving everything he had done, but it was worth it. The court ruled in my favor, and now he's legally obligated to pay me back for every single dollar of the debt he racked up in my name. But that's not all. He also has been arrested for his actions, finally facing the consequences he tried so hard to avoid. For the first time in years, it feels like justice was actually caught up with him. It's a relief, a vindication, and a huge weight off my shoulders knowing that the law is on my side. What's truly shocking, though, is the way my parents and my brother reacted. You would think after everything, the theft, the threats, the trauma, they'd feel even a shred of guilt or remorse, but no. Their faces didn't show any regret at all. Instead, there was pure, unfiltered fury that I had actually won. It was as if I had committed some crime just by demanding accountability for what he had done. Seeing them act this way was surreal and deeply unsettling. The same people who should have been my support system, who should have stood up for me after years of being manipulated and hurt, were now enraged that I refused to be a victim anymore. It was a stark reminder that standing up for yourself often makes others uncomfortable, especially when it exposes their own complicity. Even though my brother is still in prison, my parents haven't stopped trying to harass and intimidate me. They keep blaming me, saying I broke up the family, as if holding him accountable for his crimes and protecting myself is some kind of betrayal. It's frustrating and exhausting, but I'm not powerless anymore. My lawyer helped me secure a restraining order against both my brother and my parents, so I'm protected legally. If they even try to come near me or continue their harassment, I can have them arrested. Finally, there's a sense of security and control that I've never had before, and it's empowering to know I no longer have to tolerate their manipulation or threats. I'm also back in my home, away from my parents' place, so there's little they can do to me anymore. This will be the end of my update here. Thank you to everyone who took the time to read my story, offered advice, or sent messages of support. Your words have meant more than I can say. It's been a long, difficult journey, but knowing that there are people out there who understand and care has made a huge difference. Stay tuned for more stories from Our Girl Relationships.